let's talk about the World Health Organization, shall we? Action on World Health has commissioned the Bell Review, and they're launching that today.
It's made up of 9 experts who are recommending proposals to either radically reform or replace the World Health Organization.
And among those pushing for the changes is the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. And a very good morning to you, Nigel. We've spoken about the problems within the World Health Organization with you before, but for anyone that's not familiar with it or up to date, just bring us up to speed with what it is that is irritating you about the WHO.
Well, it's a government body under the United Nations. The British government's just agreed in the last 2 weeks to give it a further £310 million of taxpayers' money. Their performance during the pandemic was catastrophic. They insisted that the pandemic had come through the wet markets in China, not the fact that it was a leak from a lab in Wuhan. And they're a very heavily Chinese-influenced organization. Now they've gone further, and on the table they've got something called the Pandemic Treaty, which, when it goes through in a year's time, will mean they can tell us that we have to lock down. They can tell us we have to have vaccine mandates. I mean, it's incredible that the Labour government is even considering signing up to this, given what a failure the organisation has been. And that would be a total loss of sovereignty over health issues. So, yes, I've been campaigning against this for some time. It's not just us, though, because the incoming Trump administration also is deeply sceptical about the World Health Organization, the amount of power it wants, the bad decisions it takes, and the level of Chinese influence over it. So, yes, as you said in your intro, we're launching the Bell Review. Dr. David Bell, somebody who's worked at the WHO, along with 8 other senior medics, will produce a report suggesting how we can reform this organization to make it one where governments cooperate as opposed to giving away power. And we want this to be seriously reformed, or we have to leave it and set something else up.
The World Health Organization have been quite adamant that this pandemic treaty is about cooperation, not about ceding power. They've accused you of spreading misinformation and using this as what they call, and I quote, a populist wedge issue. They deny that lockdown mandates are part of the deal, and they say any claims that countries would be required to give away 20% of their vaccines, they say, are simply not true.
Well, it's absolutely explicit in their proposed treaty. They couldn't get it through this year, but they're determined to bring it back next year. It's the same loss of sovereignty we had as members of the European Union. It's a Brexit-style argument, but this time it's around health. And frankly, you know, when you look at the pandemic and the 3 major lockdowns we had in our country, I think they proved to be, frankly, the worst peacetime decisions ever taken by a British government. No one's been properly held to account for the damage it's done to our young people, our old people, our health service. And the idea that a remote group of people, unaccountable to anybody, could lock us down in the future is just unacceptable and should be stopped. And yet, you know, when Labour are challenged, the government are challenged in the Commons, they deny the facts. They're there, they're real, they're clear. We're serious about this campaign, and I promise you, when I look at who Donald Trump has appointed to be his health supremos, they share the same skepticism as me. So if ever there was a moment to reform this organization, with Trump coming in a few weeks' time, it's now.
Yeah, it seems quite poetic, the full circle the US has had with regards to their health leaders. You had Jay Bhattacharya, who's the head of the NIH, which was Anthony Fauci's job. And we all remember him during COVID, and, of course, RFK Jr. as well. In a reformed WHO, Nigel, where would the funding come from? Because you've expressed concerns about it coming from China. Bill Gates, of course, is a massive influence as well. Yeah. Where would funding from a reformed organisation come from?
Well, I think if we reformed it, then the Trump administration would happily play a role. We would happily play a role, as opposed to just giving away hundreds of millions with no questions asked. No, I mean, look, the argument for international cooperation is always a good argument. But the trouble is, all these globalist organizations, whether it's the EU, the UN, the WHO, they always use these situations to take power upon themselves. And that's what we've got to stop. And it's really a closed shop. This guy, Tedros, has been running it for years, despite having no medical history at all. His own sister is in a highly paid job. I mean, talk about jobs for the boys. No, this organization doesn't work. It failed during the pandemic. in every single way. It covered up to protect China, and we should not be giving our hard-earned money to an organisation that wants to take our sovereignty.
Nigel, can I ask you, whilst we've got you and talking about hundreds of millions of, whether it's dollars or pounds, these rumours, come on, you know I have to ask you. Your pal Elon Musk that you spent election night with is rumoured to be about to donate $100 million US, I think that's 78 million pounds, in a big, and I quote, FU to Starmer. Is this true? Is it going to happen?
I have absolutely no idea where this story comes from. It was a Sunday Times journalist that rang me on Saturday with it. I have literally no idea about this at all. What I do know is that Elon Musk is very supportive of me, what I'm trying to do, and he thinks that if reform do well in the UK, we can bring about the same kind of change that he intends to do with Donald Trump in America. All of that is true. Yes, he is very supportive, but honestly, this idea of huge sums of money, well, let's put it like this. It hasn't been discussed with me.
Hasn't been discussed with you, but it's not a no. What about the fact that actually it's illegal for foreign activists to get involved in British politics, and it would have to be through his British arm of Twitter? Do you worry about the optics of that, or are you comfortable with that if this does prove to be true?
Look. I'm not giving you a yes or a no.
Oh,
I don't know. I suspect this is not true. Legally, companies operating in the UK can give money to UK political parties, but I think we're a very long way away from that. Look, if it did happen, well, that'd be great. But I think it's one of those, really very good, gossipy Sunday newspaper things. Let's see, but I rather doubt it.
Nigel, can I ask you about Hunter Biden? Joe Biden has said he will pardon him. That's despite, of course, denying he'd ever do such a thing earlier this year, I think on multiple occasions. Do you think Joe Biden got a whiff that maybe the incoming Trump administration was going to be going after Hunter and indeed other adversaries?
I suspect that Trump will be far less vengeful than the Democrats have been against him. It's just not his nature. He wants to get on and do stuff and reform and change America. But the idea that the pardon covers everything and anything that Hunter Biden has done over the course of the last 11 years, I think is truly extraordinary. And for Joe Biden to say that the prosecutions against Hunter were politically motivated, I mean, my goodness me, talk about pot catching, given what they put Trump through over the course of the last year or so. Now, this is the end, a dying Democrat regime, and Hunter gets away with it. Nothing in America surprises me. Let's just hope that Trump reforms. I'm going to keep using that word because it's vital. Let's hope Trump does attempt to reform the American judicial system because it's no longer fit for purpose.
OK, Nigel, thanks very much for your company this morning. Appreciate it.
At GB News, we are proud to stand for you, for the Britain that you love, and for the values that you believe in. We are your fearless champions, but we need your support. From just £5 a month, you can make sure that your views are always heard. GB News is the only news channel with the courage to say what the silent majority are really thinking. If it matters to you, it matters to us. Join thousands of members and become part of the GB News community today. Go to gbnews.com/support.